it seems incomplete to be a human and to not be searching out and creating beauty ourselves. I just feel like it's what God does, it's who he is, and it's who he's created us to be.
Welcome, everyone, to Breaking Bread, the podcast brought to you by Apostolic Christian Counseling and Family Services. Wonderful to have you along. And that intro was Johann Sebastian Bach. I thought listening to him would be a good way to ease into our conversation, to have that conversation of Isaac Funk and Shauna Streitmatter. Isaac's an old hat here, so we're going to just move past you, Isaac.
Fine by me.
And we're going to pause and linger a bit on Shauna. Shauna, introduce yourself. You're a new voice in this space and a new face in this agency.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so my name's Shauna, and I'm a communications creator here on the church outreach team, and I went to school studying graphic design.
And our topic today is God's intention for beauty, this idea that God intends for beauty to happen. In fact, we read in Ecclesiastes, we read that he makes all things beautiful in his time. Just a moment, I'm always struck when I read a passage and it surprises me. It's like, oh, I wouldn't have said that, right? I mean, I can understand he makes all things right in his time. I could understand he makes all things good in his time. He makes all things complete in his time. And all those are true, and he does all those things. But it's been written he makes things beautiful in his time. Mm-hmm. Doesn't that suggest that there is something transcendent about beauty? I don't know. What is it? Anyway, that has launched for me this, I think, fascination of me. I think maybe I have passed over beauty when I ought not to have. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think it's interesting too, is right after that verse, I believe, is where he says he has placed eternity in our hearts. And it's almost like he's tying these two things together of beauty and eternity, which not just a measure of length, but of breadth, and that he's placed that in each one of us, like this longing for more, this longing for eternal things, and those things that he makes beautiful.
So I've been totally geeking out about this, right? I think you're right, Isaac. There is a big idea here about beauty. Right? And so, our listeners can't see this, but I brought some hydrangea flowers in just for the occasion. Exhibit A, beautiful. And things don't have to be this way, right? And so, Shauna, I'm just really intrigued. What is beauty?
Yeah, I feel like the definition for beauty in the art world has fluctuated a lot over time. But a pretty generic one would just be something that appeals to the senses of the human. Something that smells nice or looks nice or just really is lovely.
Appeals to the senses and are lovely to us. And I really like how you give us some categories. It's not just visual things that we're talking about here, but you mentioned all the other senses, such as taste, right? A really good meal is a beautiful thing. There's touch there's fabric that feels really nice. And all of these kind of come together and help us understand what beauty is.
Mm-hmm.
This question of even what is beauty is one that the philosophers and the artists of old have tried to nail down for so long. And it's like it feels so lofty that it's hard to feel like enough of an expert to even have anything to say about it at all. And so that's kind of how I'm coming to this conversation is what can I even say about this thing of beauty that I certainly don't comprehend all of it. But
and is that even a nod to God?
Right.
That he has this end ideal in making all things beautiful that we can't even get our minds around. And like eternity, we can't either.
For sure.
To your point.
And even in the secular world, you have like courses that are dedicated to figuring out answers to this question, right? Like people who are like have genuine interest in understanding what is beauty, what is this about, and what good is it for us?
It's almost one of these things that you can't deny its existence, but you can't put your finger on it either. So I had a bit of an aha moment, right? Went to the local courthouse. All right, it's out now a museum, McLean County Courthouse. One of these majestic, big, beautiful buildings that they used to make, right? And as I walked through the halls, I'm not sure it was laid out very efficiently, but it was sure laid out beautifully. And as I looked at the detail on the crown molding, for example, the detail on some of the plastering, it occurred to me that's like, man, there was a whole set of blueprints that was about the beautification of this place that I do see missing in the room that we're in at the moment, where things have been reduced down maybe to usefulness. Mm-hmm. And it just caused me to wonder, has other times and places and peoples and cultures been more aware and had a better pulse on beauty than I maybe currently have, right?
Yeah, I think here in the West especially, we have this children of the Enlightenment, like this such a rational approach to life and utilitarian, consumerist-based approach to living that we definitely are going to take something, the function of something over the form of something. And so we see that in the concrete cast buildings or, even the steel and glass skyscrapers that jut up against perhaps some of these older buildings that seem to be more interested in form than function. I think it was Oscar Wilde who said art is useless, and as saying a praise to art. But then you have someone coming on saying that form follows function, basically saying that if you get the purpose of it right, then the form can take care of itself, sort of thing. But what you see about that idea,
and you're pushing against that idea.
Yeah, so if you see that idea being played out, like I think of like the Peoria warehouse, or the warehouse district in Peoria, that like was there and then it slowly just becomes abandoned because it's ugly. It's not a beautiful place where people want to be, right? And so it's like when you create something just for the sake of utility, you end up losing utility because no one wants to be there. No one wants to be a part of it. But if you create something that's beautiful, it lasts. People want to be there. People will find ways to get into it and to use it.
I want to highlight this concept of usefulness. Shauna, I want you to speak to it as well, right? Because that is a bold statement. I think that we bristle against, right? Art or beauty. We're talking about beauty. Beauty is not useful. And I think we immediately have a posture against that, which really says a little bit more to our ideals again, right? Speaks again to our ideals. But Shauna, as you come out of the art world, right, and education and so on and so forth, how do you handle that particular notion?
Yeah, I think when people try to claim that beauty is not useful, there's a little pushback in my world, like, no, there is use in this. Like, I see the use every day in it. It's just more of a reframing and restructuring what that usefulness looks like. So I think an example is my apartment versus my brother's apartment. Both of them function perfectly well as apartments. They serve all the purposes they need to.
I think I know where this is going. Go on, Sean.
I'm not going to guess.
You're not going to guess?
No, I'm not going to guess where it's going.
I've prejudged. Go ahead.
That's okay. So they both function well as an apartment and serve that purpose, but I've chosen to put beautiful things into mine and to create this space that, for me, when there's beautiful things in it, it becomes inviting and welcoming and somewhere that I want to spend my time. So both apartments still function the way they are, but for me, I've created this space using beautiful items that is more inviting and welcoming to me. So that is the use I find in that example.
And so the value, there's a shift of value on efficiency and usefulness onto some other ideal. I think that's the powerful thing, that God has an ideal beyond use that he is trying to bring about in this world. Isaac, I think you gave a nod to the classes we take in art and so on and so forth. You've taken a lot, Shauna. I remember taking art appreciation, music appreciation, and like total eye roll. Like, this isn't useful to me. That was my line, right? This isn't useful to me. I'm just going to get this credit out of the way. Well, man, too bad. I missed the chance to curate a love for beauty and senses that detect it, right? And so I'm looking at two of you, and I, Isaac, I know you're musical. You were a musical educator at one point in time, so I think both of you have an ear and an eye for beauty. And so I would love to, again, pose this question. Where is there beauty that perhaps we're missing it? And how can we grow in that awareness?
I think we could talk about this for a long time because, it's kind of as far as your imagination would allow you to go with it. I think back to Genesis 1, and you have God creating, and that's part of beauty, is it's something that is created either by us or by God himself. And if it is by us, it is informed by that which God has created himself. But as God's creating, and he's, it's the day and the night and the land from the sea and all of these things, and then he creates man, and he's looking at all these things, he's calling them good. What's interesting about that to me is that the same word in Hebrew for good is the same word for beautiful. And so that's like God looking at his work and saying, that's beautiful.
You just informed me there. And you gave me a space to think about. When I am in the creative process, I should also be thinking about beauty. That's the way God thinks. I mean, per your example of setting up the apartments, right?
Yeah.
You brought into that creative activity and brought beauty into it, which I think is a fun thing to think about.
Well, this is what's childlike about creation. Think of a child, 3-4-year-old, thrusting into your hands a piece of art that they just created. They think this is Van Gogh, right? And they hand this to you because it's something that they think is beautiful. Like they're like, this is beautiful. Yeah. So this is how we were wired.
Kids are prolific artists.
Oh yeah.
Somehow that gets worked out of us. I don't know. What happens to us, Shauna?
I think we just prioritize different things in life at some point and just, really focus on feeling like we have to be useful with every moment of our time instead of really taking time to sit and let ourselves create, which does have a use, but we don't value that use as much.
I've just picked up perhaps on a hindrance to beauty, and that is time. Is that a fair statement? Moving quickly or rush or speed breaks down not only the creative process, but also beholding beauty activity. Is that a true statement?
But that's a real problem. And I think what true beauty does, not just in like high arts type beauty, but just in the everyday places where you can find it, perhaps in this flower here on the table, is that it stands in the face of human machine that just keeps on chugging forward, and it just stands disinterested, and it's there just waiting for someone to catch it.
And the saying, stop and smell the roses.
Right.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
To enjoy that beauty, you're going to have to stop. Is this part of God's ideal then in bringing beauty in the world, is to bring a healthy pace to the human experience? And you can't take in an art museum fast. I mean, you just can't do it if you know what you're doing. Mm-hmm. Now, if you don't know what you're doing like me, and so Shauna, like when I go to the Chicago Art Institute, right, tell me what I should be doing. You know what I mean? That's how inept I am. I feel like I've so lost the faculties of seeing beauty. I don't see it when it's 5 feet in front of my face.
Yeah, I think just let yourself gaze on something for longer than just to find its usefulness, but just to really take in the whole thing and think about all the different components that are working together just to make it what it is, and just to allow that to kind of move you.
Can you give us some categories?
Yeah, well, and would you say that everything in the museum, in the Chicago Art Institute, is beautiful? Or is it, like, that's another question I would have too, is like...
Well, now we got into a whole different discussion.
Actually, we're gonna open that can of worms, Isaac. I won't forget.
Okay.
What are some of the categories?
I mean, you can look at color or the forms or the shapes that are in that. Or even like thinking about like if I'm looking at a landscape, just the skill that had to go into that to represent that landscape in the image before you. Kind of looking at maybe the brush strokes they used or how realistic or not realistic it is. Yeah.
Elise and I went to the Louvre years back in Paris.
Yeah.
Like I know what's there ought to be beautiful to me. And so I just there and I take it in, right? But I don't know what to look for, but I noticed that as I gaze, as you said, Shauna, gazing is an important part about encountering beauty, is to gaze upon it, or to linger with it. Mm-hmm. It will actually just start to do things to me. And then I think I start to realize that's beautiful. Whereas maybe upon first glance, I wouldn't necessarily see it that way, or just because it's in the Louvre that it's a beautiful thing. I don't know that to be the case until I stop and look and realize, oh, it's pulling something out of me that seems divinely planted. the image of God in me, it's something that's calling out to that, and therefore I call it beautiful. Which maybe that's a different discussion, but
I don't think it is at all. I don't think it is at all, and it's really kind of touching on a certain pleasure. Can we say that? Can we bring that word into the conversation as well? It is a pleasing thing to behold beauty. Am I right about that?
I think pleasurable. I think consoling. I think of
Comforting.
art. Yeah, consoles you in your sorrow. It's something I feel like enhances joy. And pleasure. Absolutely.
Okay. So beauty doesn't make life possible. Beauty makes life livable, right? Isn't that what we're talking about?
That's good, yeah.
Yeah.
Which I think provides so much context for what we're talking about here and why we should talk about this. We ought to be engaging beauty. It ought to be something that we engage. It is a gift from God, and it's an intention from God. And to engage it is going to be hugely helpful to our emotional, spiritual lives, right? Social lives.
I don't think you worship without beauty.
Worship me in the beauty of holiness, as we read in the scriptures.
Right. Yeah. I think it's so essential to who we were created to be that we are. It seems incomplete to be a human and to not be searching out and creating beauty ourselves. I just feel like it's what God does. It's who He is, and it's who He's created us to be.
Okay, so now for the can of worms that I promised we'd come back to. We have a common phrase, and that is, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. At some level, that's got to be true, and at some level, that's got to not be true. If we are saying God is the originator of beauty, and God is the orchestrator and the ultimate first-person creator, then there ought to be some beauty that is agreed upon. I don't know. How does that hit? How does that hit? Shauna?
Yeah, I'd like to hear Shauna.
I don't know the answer to this question.
I don't know if that's the original statement, beauty's in the eye of the beholder. I don't know what the intent of even saying that sort of thing was. But I think the result of it, whether it was meant to be this or not, is that now people look at anything and they say it's beautiful because I say it's beautiful. Mm-hmm. And I think that becomes a real problem for us.
Yeah.
And so you have artists that are creating music, sculptures, whatever, that is like literally like a urinal, or like some other things I'm not going to say on this podcast that people are like, this is beauty because I say that that's beauty. Mm-hmm. And you ought to see it that way too, because who are you to judge my taste, right? Which is kind of what you end up getting with. But then you miss essential elements of what we've been talking about is actually in the nature of beauty itself, is something that is transcendental and that actually draws you to eternal things, draws you to the divine creator of beauty. And so I think there does have to be a line drawn. Mm-hmm. I don't think it is in the eye of the beholder in that sense, although tastes and appetites and desires, you might say, can shift, but it's not the same thing.
So Shauna, speak to the tastes and appetites.
Yeah, I think there's, within any art field, whether that's music or design, interior, or different art like painting, I think there's different styles and categories within that certain people enjoy more than others. And it's just, kind of a way that has that beauty and art in itself has become divided up in our world and sectioned off to make sure that people are seeing exactly what they want to see and exactly what they find beauty in.
You've got the jazz genre, right? You've got the classical genre, and all of this together is beautiful music, even though you might be partial to one. But Isaac, your point is still well made. We can't just say something's beautiful. We cannot necessarily just make that pronouncement. We don't have that power. One thought that occurs to me is, what is the most ugly thing? It's interesting. If we go to the other category, what is putrid and ugly and repulsive? And I think it's death. I mean, anybody on a farm, they know what a dead pig looks like after a couple of days. Enough said. And every sense of the human sense, it's crying out as repulsive. And there again, we get a nod back to God, don't we? We get a nod back to that creation. Isaac, as you mentioned, he created it living, called it beautiful.
Yeah, I think that is an excellent example of what is juxtaposed against beauty. And it's one of the things that makes beauty what it is, because beauty we experience in the midst of a fallen, broken, material world. I would say that is partially why we can even acknowledge that there is beauty, is because we see everything else. It's like beauty stands in the face of brokenness and in the face of darkness and in the face of death and says that doesn't have the final word. Most beautifully seen in the story of Easter, right? And
Jesus.
That's right. There was nothing good about Good Friday.
Yes, it had all the earmarkings of ugly.
Yeah, and it would have been forgotten to history, right? And even the Romans thought it was disgusting, right? But then they get to you get to Sunday morning, you get to Easter, and suddenly Friday was Good Friday, and it was a beautiful Friday. It is through the lens of Easter, of what comes next, that there's nothing more beautiful than a crucified Lord.
The beautified Christ, his death and resurrection. This is now expanding our view of what beauty is. And we're going to draw this conversation to a close just for this episode, but we will return to explore this further. I hope you can be with us.